Part 1. If you'd cornered me this time last year, I'd have sworn my life was rock solid, nothing cinematic, but a dependable kind of happy. I wasn't living some fairy tale happily ever after, but I had what felt like a marriage worth guarding. My name's Jack, and I'm 37. Sarah and I have been married 9 years, and our 6-year-old, Noah, can't stop talking about dinosaurs. I run a small HVAC business, not glamorous work, but it pays the bills and keeps roofs over our heads and a handful of my crews. Sarah was in marketing, with that effortless charm that got people to nod, yes, before they even realized what they'd agreed to. She was outgoing, gorgeous, always darting from one event to the next. I used to tease that she could coax or rock into a dance. I adored that spark in her, and I believed she loved my other side, steady, quiet, always home by 6, even if it meant wrapping up a job early. Looking back now, I see that steady routine may have been what cracked everything. It began with a trip, one of those girls' getaways Sarah took with her college crew down to Cabo. It wasn't the first time. I'd actually encouraged it, thinking every mom needed a breather. But the week before she left, she was colder than usual, no excited texts, no packing list banter, not even her usual critique of my folding skills. On Thursday morning, she kissed air at the door and reminded me, "Don't forget Noah's dentist appointment next Tuesday." I stood there like an idiot, watching the Uber swallow her smile, sure I was the hero in a solid marriage story. She sent a few photos, a sunset silhouette, a cocktail by the pool shot, and one group selfie with her friends. No solo snapshots, no wish-you-were-here messages. I chalked it up to her unplugging. That's vacation, right? But when she stepped off the plane, something felt off. Noah raced into her arms, but she barely bent down to hug him. Later, I leaned in for a kiss, and she half turned away, mumbling about jet lag. I gave her space, figured she needed to shake the sand out of her head. The next morning, over cold takeout, she stared at her plate like it was a puzzle she didn't care to solve. Then, dead serious, she dropped it as if ordering coffee. "I cheated on you." No build-up. No tears. Just Sarah, in her robe at the kitchen table, sipping tea like she was remarking on the weather. "What?" I croaked, convinced I'd misheard. "I cheated," she repeated, eyes locked on mine. "In Cabo, with someone I met at the resort. He's better than you." Better. Like I was yesterday's model she'd just returned. "You gave me too little," she said, as if listing ingredients. Emotionally. Physically. It felt like she'd run me over and then complained that I hadn't stepped aside fast enough. I worked my ass off. Took care of our son. Tried to build us a life, I whispered. She shrugged. "That's just not enough anymore." At that moment, I realized it wasn't a confession. It was open warfare. Days dragged by like wading through mud. She stayed home but moved through the house like a wisp. No tears, no apologies, just a hollow smile aimed more at her phone than at me or Noah. Then came the late night's new campaign, she said. But her campaign had perfume, stilettos, and phone calls that lasted until dawn. I started spotting the cracks, the guest bathroom towel damp when she never used that room, an extra toothbrush tucked in her gym bag, the faint trail of a cologne I didn't own lingering in the hallway. I tried to convince myself I was crazy, that maybe she was having a breakdown. I even Googled midlife crisis signs like a fool. But a buried part of me, one I'd tucked under years of trust, was screaming. Then one night, she strolled in well past midnight. Noah had asked for her 3 times, and my text went unanswered. I waited on the couch. "Where were you?" I said. Her eyes flickered. "You're not my father, Jack." I swallowed. "No, I'm your husband. Or have I lost that title too?" She sighed, as if I just told a bad joke. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." That was all, no explanation, no soothing words, just the cold distance of someone who'd already checked out. I didn't sleep that night, but I did start paying attention. Not the wishful thinking kind. I was bracing myself for the truth. Part 2. When Sarah's words hit me, something inside me didn't shatter, it rerouted. I wasn't broken, just rearranged. My silence after her confession wasn't me giving in. It became laser-focused vigilance. Mornings turned surreal. Sarah moved through our routine as if she hadn't detonated everything over breakfast, brewing coffee in that chipped mug we registered as ours, planting a light kiss on Noah's forehead before the bus arrived, slipping into her favorite cardigan and rouge-tinted lipstick. But it all felt hollow, like an actress nailing her lines. I stopped watching the stage. I trained my eyes on her. My first target, her phone. I didn't raid her texts, at least, not at first. I simply noticed the changes. Now it lay face down on the counter, its brightness dimmed, its vibration stilled. She carried it into the bathroom, the shower, even to pick up the mail. It clung to her like a secret refusing to die. One night, I lifted it. Locked. New passcode. She'd switched it the moment I looked away. That tiny change cracked open my doubts. I resisted confrontation. Firing a gun at every rustle guarantees a bad ending. So I leveled the scope, waited for the clear shot. I began mapping her movements with surgical precision. First clue, social media timestamps and geotags. Sarah told me she'd spent last Wednesday at a wine tasting with her friend Natalie. But Natalie's photos that night were all about a downtown concert. No wine glasses, no vineyard sunset, no Sarah. Only a blur of stage lights and strangers. Over dinner the next evening, I asked, "How was that tasting, by the way?" Sarah blinked. "Oh, Natalie got a little tipsy." I tilted my head. She posted concert pics. Her smile flickered. Right. That was afterward. We swung by for a minute. I nodded like a fool, pretending to believe the optics had improved. Her lips pressed into a thinner line, and I tucked that image into my mental evidence folder. Nightly, I sewed digital breadcrumbs. I slipped a tracking app onto her seldom-used laptop, one she synced to occasionally. Then I pored over our joint credit card statements. 2 charges leapt off the page, one late-night stay at a boutique in the Lavender 2 weeks ago, and another the week before. Both local, both billed as discreet couples getaway. The inn's reviews bristled with praise for its privacy and romantic atmosphere. My stomach roiled. That weekend, I played it casual. "Hey, Sarah, remember those nights I said I worked late last month? I just found a receipt for the Lavender Inn in our email. Ever been there?" She paused mid-sip, then shrugged. "Oh, yeah, that was Natalie's sister's bachelorette. I told you about it. You said it was at her house." Her cheeks warmed. "Right, after party at the inn. We took rooms to be safe." I smiled like she'd offered flowers. She walked off, likely proud of her spin, or maybe rattled I didn't pounce. Over the next days, her paranoia took root. Passwords multiplied. Notifications vanished. Yet she slipped once. She left her smartwatch charging on the nightstand. When it buzzed, a preview flashed. Braden. Just the first name. No emoji, no context, nothing familiar. I leaned in. No further glimpse. The watch required her fingerprint, but the name sunk in like a jagged splinter. Braden, not a coworker, not an old college mate, not any friend she'd mentioned. Anonymous, ominous. A few days later, I swung by her office under the guise of grabbing lunch together. Walking through her workspace, I smiled and shook hands with colleagues. I scanning every cubicle. Braden was nowhere to be found. Back home, I logged into our Wi-Fi router's device list. There, on the late-night logs, was B_mobile_22 connected twice, both times after midnight. One evening when Noah was at his best friend's sleepover, and another when I'd raced off to fix an urgent furnace leak. The realization slammed into me. She was bringing him here. My house. My sanctuary. Where I'd hung that family portrait, mounted Noah's shelves, built this life brick by brick. The next time she texted, "Working late," I swung by my brother's to drop off Noah, then parked a block away. The house lights stayed off, silent. At 11:45, an Uber pulled into the driveway. 5 minutes later, another car. A tall man, broad-shouldered, jeans and a low-slung backpack, a baseball cap shadowing his face, stepped out and walked inside. I sat in the dark for 20 minutes, heart thudding. Then I drove off, unable to watch the rest. I told myself maybe it was a fling, a fleeting need for novelty. But my gut told me otherwise. One evening, curled up on the couch watching a cheesy rom-com, Sarah rose to fetch wine, leaving her phone on the armrest. I held my breath. It buzzed. On the screen. Braden asterisk, "Don't forget our appointment next Friday. I'll meet you there." Appointment? Together. The words froze me. This wasn't just an affair. It was a blueprint. She wasn't cheating in the moment alone. She was constructing something that shut me out entirely. And I realized, the man I was, before all this, wasn't invited to the next chapter. Part 3. The day everything fell apart started like any other, rain drumming a steady rhythm against the kitchen window, the air heavy with the bitter scent of overbrewed coffee. Upstairs, Sarah was in the bathroom mirror, brushing on lipstick as if getting ready for a normal Tuesday. Noah's bedroom door was shut tight, the morning's dinosaur dreams still in progress. I leaned against the counter, phone in hand, eyes locked on one single word. Braden. That text about their appointment had changed everything. I never saw myself hiring a detective, I'm not the type to snoop on my own wife, but the distance between us had stretched so far it felt like a noose. So I called Drew, my old high school buddy turned private investigator. No Hollywood gadgets, just a guy who blends into crowds and watches people without being seen. I told him I needed proof. He didn't ask personal questions. He just got to work. For days later, my inbox blinked with an email that felt like a punch to the gut. I stared at the subject line for almost an hour before clicking download. Then there was no turning back. Photo 1. Sarah and Braden outside a women's clinic downtown. She wore gray leggings and an oversized hoodie, hair pulled into a messy bun. No makeup. He kept a protective hand on her lower back, their faces soft with smiles that didn't include me. Photo 2. An hour later, same spot, Sarah clutching a small envelope stamped ultrasound results, Braden leaning in close like a proud partner. Photo 3. My breath caught. They sat side by side on a battered bench, his hand resting gently on her belly above the jeans waistband. Her eyes dropped to that touch, misty with emotion, while they shared a knowing laugh, as if they were the stars of their own private rom-com. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a fling. It was a future. The final image was grainy, taken through her bedroom window the next night. A soft blue glow lit their outlines beneath the sheets. His fingers tangled in her hair, her head thrown back in laughter. Their silhouettes moved together, oddly intimate, as our wedding photo gleamed on the nightstand behind them. I didn't shed a tear. I closed the laptop, locked my phone, and walked upstairs feeling weightless, like a ghost in my own home. Sarah stepped out of the bathroom humming our son's favorite lullaby. Her robe brushed the floor, her hair wrapped in a towel. I hovered in the doorway, not eavesdropping, just soaking in the ordinary sounds of the woman I thought I knew. No trembling hands. No tears. Nothing but a hollow ache stretching across my chest. She caught sight of me and jumped. "Don't sneak up on me like that, Jack," she scolded, voice light. I said nothing. My throat had turned to stone. "Seriously, what's wrong?" she pressed, frowning as she passed. I just watched her walk away, the silence swallowing me whole. That afternoon, I drove out to the old fishing pier by my dad's place. The fog rolled in off the lake, cold mist seeping through my jacket. I sat on the weathered boards, staring at the gray horizon, trying to feel something besides emptiness. I needed that numbness. Needed to let it rush through me before I could figure out what came next. Because the appointment wasn't about a doctor's follow-up or a routine check. It was the moment their life together officially began, and mine officially ended. If Sarah had her way, I would have played her part in an elaborate lie, blamed my failed vasectomy, pretended the baby was mine, stood at an ultrasound screen while she smiled at me and the real father side-glanced with guarded pride. I would have done it for her, for Noah, because that's who I used to be. But not anymore. When I finally trudged back home, Sarah was already asleep. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching her chest rise and fall, hair splayed across the pillow like ink on parchment. This woman beside me had betrayed everything I trusted her with, our marriage, our family, our home. I thought about waking her, demanding answers, letting loose all the fury I'd swallowed. But what would that change? The damage was done. All that remained was the aftermath. So instead, I began dismantling the life we'd built, piece by piece. I opened new bank accounts in my name alone, secured copies of the deed to our house, and stashed them safely out of sight. I found a lawyer who specializes in cases like mine quietly, methodically. I backed up every text, every email, every photo into a private folder only I could reach. And then I wore my mask. I kissed Sarah's cheek at dawn, helped Noah with his spelling words, and made her tea just the way she likes it, 2 sugars, a splash of milk. I laughed at her favorite sitcoms, even when I felt bile rise in my throat. Each performance was another step in my plan, another hour closer to freedom. Because while her new story was unfolding, one where I had no part, mine was just shifting into high gear. The next chapter in my life wouldn't be written by her choices, but by mine. And I was ready to turn the page. Part 4. They say revenge has a sweeter flavor when you serve it in the very room where they once raised their glasses to your happiness. I held that thought in my chest for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment. Sarah still believed I was the stunned husband, too mortified to fight back. She looked at me with pity, convinced I'd let her betrayal slip by without a peep. But I wasn't that man anymore. Quietly, I assembled my arsenal. Every photo from Drew, every text transcript, even the recording of Sarah's voice, whispering to Sean Campbell, Braden's real name, about our plan. I dug up Sean's history, a track record of con games stretching across 3 states, fraud convictions piling up like unread emails. Their scheme was obvious. trap me with a false pregnancy, drain my resources, vanish when the alimony kicked in. Except my vasectomy was rock solid. The baby she carried wasn't mine. I spent nights ensuring every contingency was covered, bank statements, property deeds, digital backups of evidence filed safely with my attorney. Then I waited for their marquee audience, Sarah's family. Every autumn, her parents hosted a formal dinner to celebrate new beginnings. This year's theme was impossible to ignore. Her mother's invitation called it, welcoming the next generation. I played along, agreeing to deliver a toast, knowing it would be my final performance in this charade. The dining room looked like something out of a glossy magazine. A long oak table dressed in white linen, flickering candles and crystal holders, polished silverware resting beside burgundy napkins. Sarah's father stood to welcome us, voice thick with pride. Her mother dabbed at the corners of her eyes, rehearsing happy tears. Sarah, glowing in a fitted dress, rested her hand on her belly, shooting me a smile that screamed, "You still owe me this moment." Then the toast began, brother, sister, aunt, uncle, each raising a glass of deep red Merlot. Finally, all heads turned to me. I stood, wine glass in hand, heart steady. "I'd like to offer a toast," I said, using my calmest voice. "To honesty, to new chapters, and especially to family." Glasses wobbled in midair as they registered my words. I pivoted slightly, directing my gaze to Sarah. "To Sarah," I said softly, "and to the child she's expecting, that isn't mine." The room froze. It wasn't the gasp of surprise so much as the sudden hush that swallowed us all. "What are you talking about?" Sarah stammered, lips parting in disbelief. I lifted my glass higher. "I had a vasectomy 3 years ago. The paternity results came back clear last week. Unless a miracle happened, this baby belongs to someone named Sean Campbell." Her mother's napkin dropped from trembling fingers. Her father's face soured as he stared at the empty seat beside me, where our family photo used to stand. Her brother coughed into his hand, and her sister's eyes flew wide as she clawed at her throat. I pulled a folded sheet from my jacket pocket and laid it on the table, a certified DNA report. "Here are the results. Feel free to pass them around." Sarah's face fell from smugness to ash. "Michael, Jack, please, this isn't the time." "Funny you'd say that," I interrupted. "You plotted to use my income, hide behind a false pregnancy, and vanish with half my assets. Sean Campbell? He's already vanished. I sent his legal record to my lawyer. Apparently, he's great at disappearing." Her jaw twitched, but she couldn't speak. "It seems conspiring to commit paternity fraud and financial fraud doesn't go over well in court," I continued, voice firm. "Your alimony scheme ends before it begins." That's unfair," she whispered, darting her eyes around the stunned faces. "Oh, this is exactly fair," I said, setting my glass down. "To your baby, your lies, and the future you built on cheating. Because as of today, none of my assets, not a single cent, will fund your new life." The silence that followed was heavy enough to taste. I gave her one last look, a mix of sorrow and resolve, and walked out under the soft glow of the chandelier. I didn't glance back. The fallout was swift. Sarah begged, pleaded, but the evidence was airtight. The judge granted full custody of Noah to me, citing her exposure of him to a convicted fraud and her attempt to weaponize a pregnancy. My bank account stayed untouched. She left with nothing but her dignity, which she'd already traded away. Last I heard, Sarah moved into a small apartment near her mother, trying to stitch together a life from the wreckage she caused. Sean Campbell remains a ghost, vanished, debts unpaid, legal troubles mounting. Me? I sleep like a man who's finally heard his own heartbeat in a house built on honesty. I rebuilt my life from the ashes, brick by careful brick, and learned that true beginnings come not from false promises, but from the courage to reclaim your story. Part 5. 3 months after the court wrapped up, the house felt empty in a way that wasn't restful, just hollow. With Noah at my brother's for the weekend, the silence pressed in on me. I'd kept busy, endless HVAC calls, early mornings at the gym, final legal paperwork, even therapy sessions. Yeah, I swallowed that pride and sat on a couch. And yet, some nights dragged on like shadows stretching across bare floorboards. Cutting Sarah out of my life turned out to be the easy part. She evaporated like smoke, leaving no trace, no phone calls, no custody battles, no attempts to see Noah. She'd moved into a tiny apartment 2 towns over, and her partner, Sean, or Braden, whichever alias he'd chosen, vanished the moment lawyers intervened. What proved hardest wasn't missing her. It was untangling truth from memory. Because there were mornings when Noah's laughter over cereal, the sound of the school bus crunching down the driveway, or the last glow of dusk on our back porch would flicker something in me. A faint echo of what our life used to be, making me question if any of it had been real. And if it hadn't, what did that make me? Some days I felt like a man hollowed out and refilled with broken glass. Then, one dawn, she reappeared. I was on the porch, sipping bitter coffee from a chipped mug, eyes lost in the mist hovering over the lawn. The familiar click of her car door made me turn. Her sedan eased into the driveway, hesitating like guilt was gripping the steering wheel. Sarah emerged. Thinner, paler. That unmistakable curve of her belly pressing against her coat. The same coat she wore the winter I found out I was going to be a father. Back when I believed in forever. She climbed the steps slowly, as if gravity itself tried to hold her back. I stayed seated, mug in hand. She stopped a few feet away, eyes red, lips pressed tight. Jack, she said. Please. I took a long pull of coffee and let the bitter warmth roll down. Yeah, I don't want anything, she rushed on. No money. No custody. I need to say I'm sorry. Because you lost? I asked, voice even. She shook her head. No. Because I destroyed the only thing I ever knew to be real. I didn't answer. The porch swing creaked in the breeze. After a long pause she spoke again, and her words cut deeper than any confession. It wasn't just about the sex or feeling seen, though those things mattered. I was angry. At you. My head snapped up. I set the mug on the wooden railing. You built this perfect life, Jack. So steady, so reliable. You never shouted, you never broke. I felt invisible. I didn't know how to be noticed unless I set everything ablaze. Her voice cracked. She pressed her hand to her mouth, ashamed. I stared at her coat, at that pregnant curve. The reality settled over me like frost. She stood, brushed past my knee, then paused at the top step. One more thing, she said quietly. Talk to Natalie. I frowned. What? Without looking back, she whispered, ask her how long she knew. Ask why she never told you. Then she slipped into her car and drove away, leaving the engine's hum echoing down the street. Natalie, Sarah's best friend, Noah's godmother, the one who'd stood at the reading of the divorce papers with tears in her eyes while Sarah smiled. She'd been in all our pictures, a constant figure at our dinner table. I dialed her number right then. How long have you known? I demanded. Silence. Then a shaky exhale. I was afraid. I didn't want to hurt you. How long? A while, she admitted. I didn't help her. But I never stopped her. I hung up before she could backpedal further. I had everything I needed. Betrayal comes in many forms, and sometimes it wears a sympathetic face as it hands you a cookie. After that, something inside me clicked. The old version of me died beneath that coat of lies. I forged a new self, one tempered by fire, unbreakable now. Noah and I fell into a fresh rhythm. I drop him at school, pick him up after soccer, ask about his day, tuck him in with one of his dinosaur books. He never asks about the baby I'm not a part of, and I never mention it. One day, when he's old enough, he'll hear the true story. Not a watered-down version, but the whole raw truth. Because I learned that lies are like poison, they seep everywhere, even into the purest moments. One night, long after Noah was dreaming inside, I sat on that same porch. The wind kicked up leaves, bits of amber and rust swirling across the grass. I thought about endings and how they're often quiet. No dramatic doors slammed, no final speeches, just the sound of stillness after the storm. And beginnings? They're quieter still. No sunrise, no fanfare, just a man in the dark realizing that peace isn't always wrapped in joy. Sometimes it comes wrapped in scars. I'm not the same man I was. I've become something harder, something honest. And if that makes me cold, so be it. Cold things don't burn when people try to set them on fire. The end.